certain things that
Chop
will...
things up, like cut off the last 30 seconds of video of...
Yeah.
Let's try.
And at some point that's gonna go off, and I will have to pause the conversation for about 5 minutes to deal with them.
Take care of your fucking beans.
Yes.
Okay, but this is happening.
Okay.
Hope I'm in frame properly. If not, lessons will be learned.
Should I check?
Yeah, just real quick. God damn it. We're both... Because you're totally in it.
Yeah. You are, like, on the edge, so, like, if you lean, like... yeah, you're still in it if you lean back.
Just get closer to the table.
Alright.
Okay.
Cool.
So, first thing I'll do is say welcome to the very first episode of On the Fringe. I'm Jacob Coppers, and this is my first time doing any project like this at all. My idea here is not to become famous by any stretch of the imagination. If 50 people watch this, that's the most people I've ever spoken to that had my undivided attention for any length of time, so that's cool. If it gets big, cool, whatever. I felt, though, for a while, and quarantine kind of brought it up to the surface, that I was, it sounds dramatic to say it this way, but like starved for substantial conversation and quality time with interesting people. I want to learn something new. I want to get better somehow every day, and I thought this would be a really fun way to exercise that. So that's what this is going to be going forward. And for my grand debut, I have my friend Tiana here.
Hi.
And referring to you by your first name is going to be challenging for me. So I'm going to try and just say you or hey instead of your name.
Okay.
We met at work.
Yeah.
And had really interesting conversations at work. Always broken up and distracted by having to do our actual jobs individually. But I am a devout Catholic and have personally gotten into demonology and spiritual warfare from the perspective of Catholicism. And why is it funny that we're good friends?
Because I am a practicing witch.
That's right. So you're a witch. I brought my exorcist hat, just in case.
Yeah. Actually, I think it's one of the things that I think is great is I've used you as an example because I wasn't always a practicing witch. I was raised Mormon, or as they prefer, I was raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Mouthful.
Quite a bit.
But so that's how I was raised, and then when it came out to my family that I was not Mormon, and then later that I was a witch, that did not go over well with them. And I've used you as an example quite a bit because I'm like, there's absolutely no reason why people who have drastically different beliefs can't get along. And I'm always like, well, see my friend Jacob, he's a Catholic. And he still likes me.
Yeah, exactly. And this is just, it's a thing that drives me crazy when people boast about being Christians in the first place. And like, it seems heavily worn, but you can always just go back and be like, Jesus was hanging out with tax collectors. His biggest roadie ended up being an ex-prostitute. Like, he wasn't just picking the best of the best and people that thought like him. And he certainly didn't preach exclusively to just other people that thought a particular way. That's why he was constantly attacked by Pharisees and by high priests and all the rest of it. So if I can do nothing else but try to live my life in a way that's paralleled with the way he lived his life and reacted and responded to the people around him, that means not cutting people out, not saying God hates fags, not assuming that you deserve to burn on a stake, although I joke about burning you personally on a stake on a regular basis.
Yes.
But comedy is a thing, so that happens. But yeah, just, like, nobody should be better at coexisting than Christians that are actually being Christians proper.
Yeah, unfortunately, not all Christians are great at that.
No, they aren't. Now, I'm less interesting, although if I ever have an episode where I dabble really deeply into the demonology stuff, that could be fun for me to rant, but I don't want to rant. Anybody can learn anything they want about Catholicism or Christianity with a couple quick clicks. However, Wiccanry, witchcraft, and other more esoteric lifestyles are really hard to get a clear answer for, I think, for a lot of people that aren't exclusively devoting their time to digging into it. Especially now that being a witch is just a really trendy thing that e-girls are doing. So like, I have a black cat and goth makeup, I'm such a witch. Oh, sorry, I'm a Sagittarius, or some stupid shit like that. What is it specifically that you do that makes you a witch? Is there a discipline? Is there a name? Are there subgroups and things? Like, what kind of a witch are you, and
what does that mean?
what does that mean?
Define labels.
Yes, exactly.
So it is very interesting to start trying to define labels in this realm, and this is, I think, a huge part of the reason why, if you just go to the internet, you're going to find so many different things. It's really hard to get a clear picture because it is such a wide variety of things. Like, people who practice witchcraft can be Christian, they can be Satanists, they can be Wiccan, they can be Celtic mythology. Like, there's such a big overview for it. So we're
gonna have to come back to Christians can do witchcraft in a second here, because
it seems
like,
slightly
sure
contradictory to you, maybe you.
Physically, yes, they are capable, but
there are Christo-pagans who are oftentimes practicing witches. They usually get into Gnostic Christianity. Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's its own little can of worms.
So, well, a Gnostic Christianity has a lot more of the realm into occult type concepts, into concepts of the power of the divine being within humans. So it gets a little bit more in that direction, and that's why most Christian witches tend to be a little bit more Gnostic.
Yeah, I tried having a conversation about Gnosticism with one of our mutual friends, and it very quickly was just like glazed over eyes, like, you sound like some sort of mystic. What kind of Christianity? This isn't Christianity. What the hell are you talking about?
Well, even Christianity has quite a range of things.
I suppose it does, but like there's Baptists, there's Presbyterians, there's Catholics, there's the ones that sound like they eat fish, only fish. Did I already say Presbyterians?
Yeah.
No, did I? I might have. Pescopalians.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, and like, if you want to know anything about those things, it's super easy to figure out what the difference between those are.
Yeah.
So, what is your witchcraft? So,
the way that I label myself is a Taoist eclectic witch. So my background is when I was 20 years old. Well, I started getting into witchcraft when I was 19, really. I had kind of dabbled in it a little bit throughout my childhood and into my teenage years a bit, but very minimal. I didn't have a lot of resources, but when I was 19, I became friends with somebody in college who was very good friends with a girl who was raised Wiccan. And so I got introduced to some witchcraft concepts there. And then
The beans.
the beans. I'm gonna have to invent them.
Okay. This will be fun. I
gonna
wonder
be
how this will
loud.
sound on the microphone.
It's gonna take a minute. We'll just cut this part out.
Maybe. Like I said, unedited is fun.
Yeah, in my kitchen.
We're just chilling, and the beans are venting. And boy, they sure do produce more pressure and steam than a cup of rice.
Yeah.
The rice is done doing its thing in like 10, 20 seconds.
Yeah.
It's kind of calming down a little.
I always want to rush it, but it's like a bomb.
Quite, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, Boston Marathon, those were just pressure cookers.
Oh, really?
Yep.
That's what they use?
Yep.
Oh, jeez.
Pressure cookers filled with shrapnel and nails and screws and broken
Oh my
glass
gosh.
and all kinds of bullshit.
Ugh.
Yeah, no,
People.
Instapot is like a big sponsor for IEDs. Probably, I don't know. This is going on YouTube, I shouldn't just say that. I'm gonna get sued by Instapot. My very first episode, and I get canceled from the internet. I'm sure it's gonna happen eventually.
Don't try that at home, kids.
Making beans or explosives?
Explosives.
Yeah, don't do that. That's true. You shouldn't. It's inexpensive to get into, but boy, the risk and reward factor is something else. That's calmed down enough that my voice is probably going to come through clearly enough for me to say, we'll probably throw some time-stamping stuff into the description so that you can skip past the bean,
Fiasco.
the bean endeavor here. Oh, you're scaring me. Don't rush it. It's still making noise. I mean, I'm sure that the people would love to see you like, it's probably fine. Yeah, it's probably enough. It's fine. Just gonna take this thing off and duck. Blow the bottom off your fucking pantry, or your cabinet there, and just send all of those dishes.
Yeah. Just want to make sure dinner is done in time. Okay.
That sounds safe. All right.
Okay. I just gotta season and restart them.
And see, no big black cauldron, just a pot of beans. Normal people have those too. Oh, do you have a cauldron? Do you make potions?
I do.
Oh my fucking god. Holy shit. I know my brother recommended that before I come and record this, I go to confession. So that I'm in a...
confession before recording this?
Yeah, so that I'm in like a good spiritual place.
Ah, I see. So you can fight off the demons?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of
Because I think we've discussed this before. We have two very relatively different views of spirits, how they interact with us, and who we should and shouldn't interact with.
Slightly. We're close. We can talk more about that when there's not a faucet in the background.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ideally, the way these things work is that they're quality enough that when you're close to the sides of the microphone, it just picks up what's coming in on the two sides pretty direct. So it... And of course, this little guy here should also get rid of background noise. This thing.
Oh, yeah,
The fluffy boy.
fluffy...
Wind stopper? Pop stopper? Something like that. No, the flat thing over there is a pop filter. If it hadn't taken me, what, an hour and a half?
Yeah.
To get the microphone working so that I could actually record, we would have avoided the bean thing towards the end of the conversation anyways.
Yeah.
But I brought all of this equipment and I hadn't plugged any of it into a computer and tested any of it prior to this. And I figured, because someone somewhere in the web said that a Blue Yeti is a plug and play, that I was just going to plug that bitch in, open up a recording application, and just start doing the thing. I was wrong. I'm not a clever man.
Salt is good for protection.
Yes, it is. Just in general, from your practice, like just the way that it comes. If you were having a rough night, you would just pour some Morton's on the floor in front of the bedroom door, supernatural style, or do you do something with the salt? Because Catholics exercise salt.
It kind of depends for me. Typically I just use salt. Here's another thing. You start getting into the realm of symbolic versus literal.
Mm-hmm.
And the salt I typically use more symbolically. I personally am not a purist in the sense of it doesn't really matter. But I do like to use Himalayan salt. Just, I don't know, as a personal preference.
Because
it's pink and cool.
Okay, I
Makes
wasn't
you feel
sure.
cool.
There was also like the Nepalese people are very pure, so the salt's gooder than the American salt.
Nope. No real rhyme or reason other than the fact that I just feel cooler
Perfect.
on that particular one.
I have a little bit of Himalayan pink salt. I don't use it very often because it's... Jesus Christ. Whoopsie. Really coarse. So like it's a texture thing more than a seasoning thing, plus it's more expensive than a giant jug of white salt.
I also like the Himalayan pink salt because I'll get the rocks and then I crush it as part of the process.
Having a mortar and pestle, you'd think I would just be like, yeah, no problem, I'll pour the coarse salt in here and I'll just... And then it'll be just as usable as normal salt, but I don't do that. On account of lazy.
That's fair. I wouldn't do that normally. I only do that if I'm going through a whole process.
You have literally nothing else to do, and it seems like grinding up large pieces of salt is the move today.
More like if I want to put extra intention in it.
So do you believe that cooking with love is legitimate?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's good.
Okay.
And that's not just a witchy thing, because my grandma believes the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's just the ingredients, but whatever.
All right, so I was saying how I got into this madness / what kind of witch I am, because that leads into it.
Yes.
So, when I was 19, I was friends with a girl who was friends with a girl who was raised Wiccan. And so I learned a little bit there. And then when I was 20, I met a man who was trained in Taoist magic. And he actually, like, from what I understand, learned from, like, actual practicing Taoist people. And so that's where I started getting into that. And he specifically focused on the magical aspects of Taoism, which starts getting into alchemy and things like that. And so I started incorporating that into my practice. And then throughout the years, just kind of picking up pieces here and there, studied Kabbalah a bit. That's the Jewish mysticism. And I, let's see, what else have I...
The Kabbalah stuff is where I justify it not being aggressive or dangerous for me to wear and have Enochian sigils on my accessories.
Oh, fair.
Yeah, because they fuck around with stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. But all Abrahamic.
Yes, exactly. That's the point. I'm like, yeah, okay, I get this gray areas, but Abrahamic, so I'm fine.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I just kind of picked up pieces, and then I delved into studying Wicca a lot more, studied a little bit of Satanism, which you aren't gonna like.
That's, you know what, it is what it is.
And studied a little bit of Celtic stuff, like Druidry.
Druids are fucking sick.
Yeah. And yeah, I just kind of pieced it together. And one of the things that gets interesting with the witchcraft world is, like I said, there's a lot of different types of ways to be a witch. And that's part of the reason why it's kind of hard. Everyone kind of has their own style, their own types of practices and stuff. There's definitely common threads. And basically the idea is a concept of believing that humans and nature have some sort of magical property. And we're not talking like Harry Potter magic. We're talking like energetic forces.
Right. Start getting into the metaphysics of it.
Yeah, metaphysical, quantum realm type, quantum physics type concepts. Where it's just the idea that with intention, you can use the world around you to manipulate a desired purpose.
Okay. And at the end of the day, the baseline is manipulating energy.
Yeah.
There's energy that flows through everything, all the time, all of it, particularly organic things.
Yes.
And the manipulation of that energy with intention and discipline can produce a specific outcome.
Yeah.
Okay. So how does that affect you? How is that your practice? What do you do?
So, let's see.
You can go balls to the wall. Like, I'm not having this conversation because it's going to be like the safe diet version of what it is that your lifestyle looks like. Like, I want to get into the nitty gritty.
Okay. So this will be interesting. So first of all, some very, very base level stuff. Tarot cards. You're currently in a house that has 3 tarot decks.
Great.
And 2 oracle decks.
Fantastic. Didn't even know an oracle deck was a thing.
Oh yeah.
I'm so excited.
The Oracle decks, I think, are they're less popular. I think they're more of a modern thing. I'm not as familiar with the history of the Oracle decks, whereas tarot decks have a pretty long history.
Oh, yeah.
Playing cards are actually based off of old ancient tarot decks. There's like connection between, yeah. So every tarot deck has 4 suits, just like playing cards has 4 suits. Tarot deck suits have a total of 14 cards instead of 13, but it's very similar. And a lot of like divination tools using playing cards have similar concepts to tarot cards. I'm not as familiar with the divination with playing cards, but there's some crossover there. But
boy.
Did I just ruin gambling for you?
I was literally about to say this adds a whole new layer of guilt as a Catholic going to like Las Vegas and sitting down and actually gambling with real money at a poker table and looking at these things like, oh, Jesus Christ. Like the next 5 years is in my hand right now.
So yeah, tarot decks and things like, let's see, something that's pretty common is candle magic, using candles for various spells. Sometimes it's as simple as like carving a word or a sigil on the wax of the candle and then burning it, and either you're getting rid of what you're burning or you're releasing what you're burning, depending on how you want to do it.
Like at the base of the candle or all the way at the top?
Like
how quickly do
I would
want to
take
melt it
like
down?
a taper candle, one of those long ones.
Yeah.
And write like, and I have ones that will last 5 hours. I have ones that'll last 10 minutes.
I would definitely get the 10-minute one. Like, I don't have 5 hours to get rid of like my neighbor's stupid dog that shits on my lawn and just start fucking.
Yeah, but see, sometimes the 5-hour ones are nice because if there's something that I consistently want to bring into my space, I can carve that onto the candle, and then that candle can get lit every time I'm doing anything. So if it's like love and light, that's like one of my favorite things, love and light.
Of course.
So the idea is that as the flame is burning, the energy from that concept that's carved into the wax is being released. Or if you were to burn the candle all the way down, it's that the flame is consuming something negative, maybe.
So once again, intention has everything to do with it.
Intention has everything to do with it.
Cool.
So that's a common, candle magic. I typically will light candles as a form of prayer, which you might relate to with Catholicism. So a lot of, especially when I have like giving thanks, giving positive energy, sending blessing to someone, or in the event of someone passing, I'll often light a candle for them. Things like that, just as essentially a small blessing of just love, gratitude, and just giving an amount of energy to that and saying, I want to send these good vibes out,
right,
type thing. And then there's lots of burning things involved. Something that I learned pretty early on that I thought was funny was witchcraft is messy in like a fun way.
Physically
yeah,
messy. There's just shit everywhere. Crafty. Yeah. Great.
So anytime you're doing a craft, you've got ribbons all over the place. You've got stuff everywhere, and it's messy and sticky, and there's glue involved. Similar kind of concept. I've gotten wax in my carpet. Lots of fire. I like setting things on fire.
Well, I think that there might actually be something to that that's not just witchy related, because I want to say it's Shaolin monks, but I might be wrong. But they're like really into like long-term meditation and like breath work.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't breathe up in their chest. They breathe from their diaphragm in their belly because they believe that there's fire in the belly of the human spirit,
Right.
and that's like a core element that connects us somehow. I'm making myself sound like a moron. I don't actually know like what I'm talking about technically, but they believe in this like inner fire.
Right.
And so it would make sense that if all of this is intention based and you're trying to transfer some of yourself through something else and release it or get rid of it, that connection is through fire.
Yeah. And I think, well, one of the things is there's a lot about elements. And if you think about, historically speaking, fire's a big deal. Fire, talking back in ancient civilizations, fire was life. Like that's what kept you warm. It was extremely important for people. And so a lot of witchcraft is based in the concept of reconnecting with nature. So it's very focused on the elements. And then a lot of it is also based on, especially once you start getting into like European pagan groups that a lot of people are trying to reconstruct, like the Nordic and Greek mythology, those kinds of things. People are taking those historical belief systems and reconstructing them now. And so for a lot of those civilizations, fire was a big deal. Because if you look at the Northern European groups, for example, that was their way of surviving winter.
Which is most of the year.
Yes,
it's cold
exactly. As fuck. Exactly. So, fire is that life source. And it helps that I've also always been a bit of a pyromaniac.
Sure.
But that it's also symbolically important because if you think about fire is both destructive and also renewing. So when a forest burns, it destroys it, but the process also makes the ground better for new growth.
Right.
And so a lot of times when there's something negative in my life that I want to get rid of, I burn it. And I do so with the intention of those ashes then go back to the earth to become new life.
That's a little druidy, right?
Yeah,
like
and it also goes a little bit into alchemy because part of the concept of alchemy is that you can't create anything out of nothing. Like
there's direct trade-offs.
Yes, there's direct trade-off. And so a lot of times I will take a negative feeling and alchemically turn it into a positive feeling.
Like a month ago,
so it's
I watched
like
As Above, So Below, and that's the only reason I have any concept of alchemy whatsoever. Because I watched it and I was like, oh, that's kind of a weird thing. So I Wikipedia rabbit holed for a little bit about alchemy. But
yeah,
I had no idea that just is it just burning a thing, or is this something where the candle magic comes into it as well? Is that
candle
alchemical?
magic can come into it as well, and it depends. The candle magic's a little bit more common in like Wicca and other pagan forms of magic. It's not as common in Taoist magic. In Taoism, they use a lot more incense, and a lot more sigil stuff.
Because if alchemy's the root of it, then that trade-off is essential.
Alchemical symbols have tons of...
Then the trade-off is essential, whereas with perhaps candle magic, you're not really sacrificing anything in exchange. It's just intentionally summoning
Right. I typically still put in the influence of the alchemy, that I'm like the amount of energy that goes into the flame, the amount of energy that goes into my focus, my meditation, like that still plays a huge role. And a lot of witchcraft goes into like the amount of intention you put in is what you get back.
Okay, so there is still always a trade-off.
There is still always a bit of a trade-off.
But then that makes sense with energy anyways.
Mm-hmm.
If you get into the metaphysical side of things, there's always a trade-off. There's always, you put something and you get something out. You can't just with no effort.
Yeah. So the kind of going back a little bit to how I label myself a Taoist eclectic witch is most of my philosophy and a huge part of the roots of my practice are based in Taoist philosophy and Taoist magic. So I put that label, but then eclectic because I've pulled from so many different sources. Mm-hmm. And then witch, but because I practice witchcraft. But one of the things that, like I was saying earlier about how there's such a variety of ways of being a witch, that's part of where the eclecticism comes from, is because there are some people who will choose a very, very specific path where I was making the beans earlier and I was talking about potions and kitchen stuff. Kitchen witchery can be a very specific path. Some people...
No shit. Kitchen witchery is a established
yes,
phrase.
Yes.
Goddamn.
So that is using cooking as a form of witchcraft. So so I don't personally do this because I'm not a good cook, but like, so where I would burn a candle and like release the energy into the world, someone else might bake a cake for the same purpose. And it would just depend on how they put ingredients in, how they decorate it, whether or not they take a piece of it out and bury it, or taking a piece outside and burying it. It's like a form of an offering to, gods, to the fae, to nature.
The fae.
The fae, yes.
Okay, cool.
Fairies, dragons.
No, I play D&D.
Yes.
So I at least know what a fae is.
Yep.
Burying cake. That's crazy. So it's not just like Hollywood witchery where everything is spooky and there's seals and supernatural popular show. Witchcraft from there is what everybody kind of gets in their mind. But you can bake a cake and put good or bad intentions into the cake. Mm-hmm. And now this cake is a fucking supernatural thing.
Basically. I wouldn't call it... I personally wouldn't call it supernatural.
Paranormal?
I would say more... I guess, how would you define supernatural? I would say natural... The side of nature that we don't always dive into, the side of nature where spirituality has its home in the first place.
Right, so then the word supernatural in and of itself could be subjective.
Yeah.
Because what's just part of the world that's existing parallel to you right now that you believe you're interacting with is not above what's normal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. But the cake is no longer just a pastry. It's no longer just food.
Because an intention was put into it. And a lot of times specific ingredients, specific spices, because there is also herbal magic, where certain herbs mean different things. And so if you are trying to create a cake for...
We'll just keep using cake.
Yeah.
For the,
Yeah. If you're trying to create a cake for a specific purpose, you want to use flavorings to go with it. So, for example, citrus could be related to later in the year, the winter. It's because a lot of where citrus grows it's typically ripe during the winter. That's why oranges were like a special thing at Christmas time back in the day.
That's cool. Good.
I mean, as far as I know.
I sat down to learn. If I take anything else away from this conversation, it'll be that back in the day, oranges were a big deal during Christmas. Did not know that.
You didn't know that?
Nope.
Oh, okay. They're like, you know those orange chocolate things that they sell at Christmas?
I know about orange stuffed into chocolate, like orange creams.
Oranges are like a very common Christmas thing.
Cool.
And it's largely because places that grow citrus, it's wintertime. And so around the same time as Christmas is the pagan holiday Yule. It's on the winter solstice. And so you may use the citrus orange in a cake as a symbolic representation of the sun returning. The citrus is usually associated with warmth and sunlight and brightness.
Because after that day, longer days, it's going to start getting warmer.
Yeah, because after the winter solstice, the sun is coming back. And so Yule is a celebration of the return of the sun, knowing that light will return.
Huh.
But, which gets a little interesting when you start comparing it to...
What you just said, just
Christmas.
the vernacular parallel there is quite interesting.
Which takes down an interesting route with Catholic holidays. There is a parallel.
Oh boy, yes there is.
There is a parallel from pagan holidays to almost every Catholic holiday.
Yep. Now, the way that I always understood this, because people have brought that up as a point, but they use it in a gotcha way to try to discount or discredit. I could be wrong, but the way that I learned about it was that when Constantine was the emperor of Rome and he was trying to establish Christianity as the religion of the empire, he understood that going all over what was now the known world and saying, everything you believe is wrong, this is God, fix yourself, immediately wouldn't fly. And he didn't want all of these uprisings and fucking religious wars in his empire, so they had a huge convening of all the different governors from all the different places that had been conquered. And was it the Council of Nicaea? Council of Nicaea, I think. I could be wrong. And
Council of Nicaea, I know, is the big one.
Basically, it was like, okay, we can't just turn everyone's belief system on their heads. How do we integrate so that this is palatable?
Right.
And Christmas and Easter and all of these things that if you break down the phrases and the language of origin comes from every fucking corner of the Roman Empire at that time and all of those different religious belief systems and turned into what it is now.
Yeah. And that's where you get a lot of very similar symbolism, very similar concepts, because that is my understanding as well, is that when Europe was Christianized, they took European pagan holidays and Christianized them, turned them into, changed it. So like Easter, for example, pagan equivalent would be Ostara. And Ostara, Easter is actually a derivative word of Ostara.
I never heard Ostara. I'd heard Estar, which was like an Egyptian thing or something.
Yeah,
like
that there is. I think there's there's a goddess that it has to do with.
It's a fertility thing, I think.
It is a fertility thing.
Yeah.
Which I'm blanking on actually which pantheon the goddess comes from. But her symbols are the rabbit.
They're quite fertile.
And the egg. And so hence the Easter Bunny.
Yes. Who fucks like a rabbit and then shits out colorful eggs.
Exactly.
Like crazy. Yep.
So,
straight Cadbury.
Yes. So you get a lot of that symbolism left over. And part of the reconstruction that a lot of neo-pagans, so new pagans, are doing is to try to take some of those older concepts that were Christianized and ultimately somewhat destroyed as a result, and trying to reconstruct them for modern day.
Revitalizing. And this is the thing that you said was something that you wish you could talk about if you had a pedestal to stand on, which was essentially big religion ostracizing and silencing paganism in the modern era.
Yes.
So I would love to hear more about that effort.
So...
And possibly how it is you're trying to play into it. I don't know if you are networking with other people or you're part of some sort of underground fucking pagan movement or something.
So the pagan community is growing. It's actually growing quite a bit in modern times. But one of the things is that with Western society being heavily Christianized for so long, it's... How do I put this? It's sometimes disheartening because when we start going into researching ancient pagan religions, a lot of the documents that we have as resources are Catholic priests actually writing about these groups of people from the perspective of not entirely understanding them and in many ways hating them.
Yeah, Christian theologians with a bias built in against anything that isn't monotheistic.
Exactly. So already, what we have left that survived the last couple 100,000 years...
100 or 1,000.
Yeah.
Maybe not 100,000.
Yeah, those were meant to be separate numbers.
Later we can get into, like, first world civilizations and paganism back when aliens were telling us how to build pyramids and shit.
Yeah. So, that goes into, like, more New Agey things.
Sure.
New Age conspiracies. But anyway, speaking of which, that's a good thing to make a distinction of. New Age versus witchcraft. One of the biggest differences is witchcraft is a little bit more based in tradition, based in ancient cultures. New Age is a little bit more based in like science and aliens start getting involved and stuff. That's a very rough. There's a lot of overlap. That's a very rough distinction.
Enormous Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
we don't have to talk about aliens.
people are gonna hate me. But I'm just saying that is a very rough distinction. But
let them cry about it. Let them cry about it. If they're upset, that's because they're doing it wrong.
But but anyway, so over the last 1,000 years or so, what's survived is limited. And I think for a lot of people who are wanting to reclaim those nature-based religions, it's heartbreaking because it's a loss of culture to a degree. And then on top of that, so already culture was lost over the course of history. And then on top of that, nowadays, when people are trying to build that, trying to get that back, society is very catering to Abrahamic religion. Abrahamic meaning Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. Those are the main religions in the world.
Yeah.
And Western society in particular is very catering to those things. if you think about every time anybody mentions deity, they mention it in the singular.
Yeah.
Anytime people, like if you go to any department store, you'll find wall hangings with Bible verses, or you'll find a wall hanging with the cross or whatever. Things like that is just very favored. Whereas if you try looking for anything pagan related, you're going to have to go on the internet. You're going to have to,
for example,
find a specific store.
If you were assuming that you could find pagan wall hangings at Kohl's, what would that look like? Just quick sidebar.
Tree of Life symbols are pretty common, which I'm starting to see more often in
Is
general.
That's Nordic, right? Or is it Celtic?
Norse.
Norse?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Oh, no, I'm seeing
well, actually,
huge resurgence of that as an aesthetic.
To be fair, the concept of the Tree of Life is pretty universal. It's also in Kabbalah. Mm-hmm. So the Bible talks about that the angel guarded the Tree of Life after Adam and Eve took the fruit because they couldn't take up the Tree of Life. Yeah. So the Tree of Life concept is very universal, but the actual Yggdrasil, I think is the name, the Norse name. I might be wrong, but
that rings a bell. But a lot of this is subtly ringing some bell somewhere.
Okay.
I read a lot of stuff just real quickly.
Yeah. So that's just anyway. I'm bad at names and stuff and pronunciations and everything like that, especially because most of my knowledge is from reading, and there's not many people to talk about things to, which is another thing. A lot of Christian religions have pre-established community, whereas pagans work really hard to try to create communities, and it's not always easy. It's sometimes scary to even open up about the fact that you are pagan or a witch or whatever, because a lot of people's reactions are negative.
Yeah.
And especially since I would actually argue that potentially most, and this is just spitballing. I don't actually know statistics or anything.
That's okay.
But I wouldn't be surprised if most people who get into witchcraft and paganism, which they're not necessarily the exact same thing, but there is overlap. People who get into that are coming from Christian families in a lot of cases.
That would make sense.
And so I know when I was 19, I was still living with my parents. So I was completely hiding the stuff I was doing. And because I knew that my parents would have not nice things to say about it. They would tell me why it was wrong or unnecessary, or other religions have some truth, but ours is the only true one.
Would they go so far? I don't have any concept of whether or not Mormons even believe in demons or evil spirits.
Oh, yes,
they
do.
go to the point of assuming that you may be under some form of affliction?
Yes. In fact, when my family found out I was a witch, a couple of my sisters straight up were like, "You're gonna get possessed, don't do this." Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm smiling because pretty much any Catholic is going to say the same thing. Any of the stuff that it is that you're dabbling in, that you're doing, anything that you're praying, all this candle stuff, you're just opening the door for possession.
Right.
That's exactly what you're doing. There's no other answer to it. So...
And that's a huge part of it. Okay, so Christianity is the majority in the Western world. And they have this belief system in a lot of Christian denominations that any form of witchcraft or paganism or worshiping of other gods is evil.
Yeah, we were catching y'all on fire.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's really hard, and this is something that I think a lot of people don't fully realize, is simultaneously holding a belief that something is evil, and also trying to be accepting of the fact that people have the right to practice how they do, that's a very dissonant.
Oh, yeah. Well, the idea of, like, colonializing the West in the first place to get away from religious persecution, and then within the span of 50 years immediately persecuting somebody else's religion
Yeah.
to the point of genocide. Not great.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you've got such a dichotomy. Like you said, any good Christian should be able to accept people and, like, love people.
Hate the sin, not the sinner.
Right. But from a pagan perspective, it kind of sucks that a huge portion of the population views my religion as a sin.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah.
And so it's like, what if the coin was flipped? What if Christianity was the minority? What if Christianity was the ones that were viewed that way? People wouldn't particularly like that. In fact, anytime the coin tries to get flipped, anytime there's anything that infringes upon a Christian domination,
Right.
you hear this is an infringement of my freedom of religion.
Yeah, exactly. So like, personally, you probably won't find a Baphomet inside of my home, ever. But the fact that some people that have an established tight-knit community are trying to prop one up somewhere publicly, being met with really, really aggressive protests, if the coin was flipped and somebody was trying to put a big Jesus statue up in Rio de Janeiro, and they were just being attacked by hordes of people saying, how dare you try to put something up like that? Paganism is the way it's always been. This is aggressive. This is dangerous. You're attacking me and my religion.
Right.
Yeah,
It's not fair. And it's interesting you bring up the Baphomet statue. That's the Satanic Temple that does that. Their entire thing is that anytime a public building, a government-owned building, starts trying to push anything that would favor a particular religion, usually Christianity, the Satanic Temple comes along and petitions for equal rights.
Right.
So the Baphomet statue was designed because I believe it was some government building in Texas or something, I don't remember exactly, was trying to put up a huge monument that had, like, the 10 Commandments.
I thought it was one that was already there, and it was like Oklahoma or something.
Maybe
where
there
it
was
was already
there
some
was
10
something
Commandments
in
there.
Oklahoma too. They've done a lot of stuff. Places where people push, like, Bible curriculum in public schools. They then push satanic curriculum in public schools. Just to kind of bring light to the fact that that's not fair. You
Right.
can't favor a particular religion and then deny others. And I know I watched a video once of in a like city council meeting or something somewhere, they started having prayer and having, like, pastors come in and do prayer.
I think I know what you're talking about.
And then they got a petition from I believe it was a Druidic priest, saying, like, I would like to do prayer. And he goes in and starts his prayer, and people are literally getting up out of the room and leaving because they're offended.
There was one that I just finished watching a couple days ago, and it was a little tiny city hall meeting, and someone said a prayer, and at the end of the prayer, some other dude came in, he's like bald, got glasses, and starts his own prayer, and I cannot remember if the actual word name, Satan and or Lucifer, was used in the prayer, but it totally was. And as soon as this guy walks in, all but 2 of the council people get up and walk out of the room. The door closes. He finishes his thing. He says thank you, walks out, the door opens back up, the council people come back in, then everyone does the Pledge of Allegiance.
Right.
And I was like,
But
what the fuck's going on?
if an atheist or a pagan or a Hindu or a Taoist were sitting in that room and a Christian prayer is said, that's normal.
Yeah.
And so it's very one-sided in that regard. And so when you start talking about religious freedom, religious rights, religious equality, from just a government standpoint, like, you can believe my church is the only true church, that's one thing, but believing that as your own, as part of one's own religious views, and having that be part of our government systems.
Yeah, opening up a government proceeding with a prayer that is suited towards one religious.
Right. And this is why I hear people always talk about put prayer back in public school, that kind of stuff. And I'm always like, the moment that every single Christian parent is 100% okay with their kindergartner doing satanic prayers in public school, then sure, we can put whatever kind of prayer back in school that you want. But that's never going to happen. It's never going to happen.
You don't think ever?
I don't.
Like, you don't foresee a path where people with coexist stickers on their cars are actually living in a society that
really is coexisting,
that is unbiased and favoring to everyone.
I think it's possible. I do genuinely think it's possible. I don't think it's probable. We're gonna need, like, Age of Aquarius enlightenment status.
I don't know what that means.
The Age of Aquarius, that was like, we entered the Age of Aquarius, and it's supposed to be a new beginning, and, like, the whole, like, 2012 end of the world thing, a lot of people talked about that it's not the end of the world, we're just shifting into a new age. It's a very new agey concept.
Okay. Are we currently in the Age of Aquarius?
I believe so, yeah.
Sick.
So, potentially the idea is that human evolution is progressing, and that we are developing spiritually in such a way that we will eventually be more in tune with the divine essence of the universe. And the more all of us do so, that we will all be more interconnected, and we'll all start to see that we're not as different as we think we are, that kind of thing. And we, peace, love, and joy. And
I think the epicenter will be in Colorado once they legalize shrooms.
Valid.
Like, everyone's just gonna trip balls and be like, oh my god, none of this matters. Oh my gods. See? Oh my gods. None of this actually fucking matters. So, and I can see the issue, once again, devout Catholic, everything you're saying, I'm hearing and listening to understand, but there's obvious red flags in my head. And for me, caring about you as my friend, wanting to try and help you in the community that you belong to, would have to go against my own baseline teachings to support and promote, like, for legal and political reasons, I don't think I would be comfortable seeing kids praying rosaries in church, because I recognize that would be...
You mean in school?
In school, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you said church, I'm like, that's where it belongs.
In school, because that would be putting a divide in people, right? And then there's another part of me that's like, well, that would be great if everybody was praying in school, then maybe people wouldn't be such assholes. But then, if I wanted to try and help you somehow, help your community, I would have to put aside my own beliefs and the things that I'm supposed to cling to and promote paganism.
Right.
Openly, publicly, vote towards it,
right.
Speak on it. And I don't know if that could get me excommunicated. I don't think so. Once again, you don't get excommunicated for fucking kids, so
here's
probably
the thing.
not.
Separate personal and public life.
Mm-hmm.
My political views are to make it so that everybody has equal rights, equal access, that kind of thing. So I might vote for something that I personally have issue with. Okay, so for example, politically speaking, I'm pro-choice. I think abortion should be legal. Personally speaking, I have some moral qualms with it. But my personal belief and my personal morality shouldn't infringe on somebody else's ability to do as they will.
Right, that's a subjective thing.
Yeah.
That's your inner turmoil, not someone else's inner turmoil.
Exactly. And so if more people voted based on and like behaved in government society and just looked at things from a more what does everybody need instead of what do I personally believe in, things like gay marriage would have been legalized way sooner.
Mm-hmm.
I know Utah, and this is partly because I was raised Mormon, so I'm familiar with it. Utah tried to pass a legalizing medical marijuana not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was completely shut down because Mormons believe that use of marijuana is against their health code. But that shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter if I personally don't want to use marijuana.
Right.
Like, for even if it's for religious reasons, my religion shouldn't be influencing how I decide society should function.
Right.
For everyone. Because if religion is influencing what I'm doing, then I am imposing my religious views on everybody else, and I am infringing on everybody else's freedom of religion.
Right.
And so there are ways where it's like, okay, so your private life, yeah, you're not going to start a pagan community. You're not going to vocally be like, yeah, go paganism. You know what I mean? But...
And then be in church on Sunday.
Right. But something you can do is support bills that really emphasize religious equality and religious freedom, because that helps everybody. That helps everybody.
I think this is something that especially won't... I hate to be pessimistic about it, but maybe just realistic, won't catch any headway as long as... It's funny, this is going to become political. A bipartisan system.
Yeah.
Because whether you're Democratic or Republican, most of them have a Christian base, if they have a religious base at all. Yeah. But then, of course, their morals are different on this side and their morals are different on this side. But, like, libertarian, who just believes in, like, mass deregulation and actual freedom or liberty for everybody, or somebody who doesn't really have the mindset of voting with their conscience, you know,
mm-hmm.
or their moral compass. Because, like, I'm bouncing around here a little bit in my head. I've become much more libertarian, slightly right, but very much just like freedom for everybody. It was like a cute little sticker of like two dudes hugging each other at the waist, says I want gay couples to grow marijuana and protect it with machine guns. Just freedom for everybody. And I feel that way. I haven't had the opportunity to vote that way, but if I did, then I might run into a conundrum where it's like, okay, so what all are we deregulating? What all are we opening up? What all are we just making equal free for everybody? Oh shit, that is in stark contradiction to the church.
Are you going to legalize prostitution?
Right.
Are you going to legalize abortion? Are you going to legalize death penalty? Like, it does get ambiguous.
It's definitely muddy for Christians who have absolute rights and absolute wrongs.
Mm-hmm.
And when pagan lifestyles are one of those absolute wrongs, it's like, well, shit, I want my friends and my neighbors to be free. I want them to be happy as an American. But am I lining myself up for a smite? by saying, fuck it, legalize prostitution. That's not going to have an impact on
not
my life.
Not that has anything to do with being pagan.
Right, no, it doesn't. Sure, it doesn't. But that just as an example, right? I'd be like, cool, if you want to be pagan, you can be pagan. If there's something that we can do legally that solidifies your legitimacy and protects you the same way that Christians have some sort of protections.
It is, like, a lot of the pagan religions are recognized as legitimate religions, and do have religious protections. It's more of a systemic issue.
We're hearing a lot of that right now.
Yeah, there is a lot of that. But it is more of a systemic issue where, yes, technically by law, a Druidic priest or a Wiccan or whatever is just as within their rights as a Baptist preacher to give the prayer at the president's inaugural address. Right? Mm-hmm. But nobody ever chooses a non-Christian. Nobody ever, that invitation doesn't necessarily get given out. A lot of times it has to be requested. A lot of times it's somebody who wants to make a point has to say, hey, I want to do this thing, and they're not legally allowed to say no, and so then they start saying no to everyone because they don't want to have to say yes to the pagans.
Right. But at the end of the day, we still have presidents that either can do it or will or won't put their hand on a Bible.
Yeah.
When they're being brought in anyways.
Yeah. They
don't have the camera focusing on a large table covered in an array of different books.
But can
where they're
you
like,
imagine?
Pick one.
Now this is going into Abrahamic religions, but especially in America, can you imagine the outrage if a president of the United States, when being sworn in, wanted to use the Quran?
Yeah, I can.
It would be bad. And it would make so many people angry, and the fact that it would make so many people angry just shows, okay, so even within the Abrahamic religions, we have a prejudice against Islam.
Yep. I mean, especially right now. It might be something that you could have gotten away with prior to 2001.
Yeah,
but now, anybody who's alive who remembers 9/11 and had any investment in the war on terror is like, wow, cool. The president is a terrorist and you can't change my mind.
Right. And how sad.
Yeah.
That's a problem. The fact that, even within Abrahamic religions, Christianity is highly favored. Mm-hmm. And once you start getting out of Abrahamic religions, because you'll hear a lot of Christians who are supportive of Muslims will say things like, well, at least they believe in, the same-ish God.
Like the same father.
Yeah, same.
The same creator.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, at least they're kind of there. Kind of the same way that a lot of Christians will say, oh, well, I think that this particular Christian denomination's a little wonky, but at least they still believe in Jesus. They're saved. That kind of thing. You start going further out, the less you have in common, the less you have to say, well, at least they believe in this. You start getting into paganism, and you've got people who believe in multiple gods, or who believe in a little bit more of a, pantheistic concept where, the universe is God and everything is God. You get into nature-based concepts where it's the divine is within the plants and the animals and the people, and it starts getting, the concept of God starts getting further and further from what the Christian ideal is.
Yeah.
And that becomes scary to Christians that it's so different. And then you've got things like verses in the Bible where it talks about, if she be a witch, burn her, or something like that. But you start getting into that kind of a realm, And there's also a lot of misunderstanding on top of that because since pagan religions aren't as common, they're less known about. So you've got, okay, so for example, when my family found out that I was a witch, they automatically assumed I was Wiccan, for one.
Okay.
And part of that was because the way I told them, I was trying to invite them to a Wiccan ceremony thing. But yeah, but
how generous of you to at least extend the invitation.
It was for me. I did a Wiccan year and a day, and I wanted to do like a traditional like initiation thing.
How does that work? You say a year and a day?
A year and a day, yeah. So it's the concept of following the sun's cycle, and you do practices every single day.
Okay.
And it's essentially used as like a training camp for witch, I guess you could say.
Okay.
So it's like your time of training. It's the time you learn basic concepts and all that kind of stuff. And you can do it multiple times throughout a practice. But anyway, and it's just following the sun cycle through the year. And so it's a year and a day because the reason why we have leap years is because the sun's rotation is actually 365.25 days. Mm-hmm. And so they just add on that last day for that little tidbit. But anyway,
that graduation ceremony look like?
Graduation ceremony.
What is it that you were inviting them to? What is occurring?
So my plan. Now this didn't happen, and largely because of their reaction, but my plan originally was to rent out a church that was pagan friendly. I do know of one.
Cool.
Unitarian Universalists are usually pretty pagan friendly.
Never even heard of them.
They used to be, they used to be like Christian denomination, but Unitarian was the idea that all God is one, or they had the idea that the Trinity was one or something. Anyway, I don't remember exactly. And then the Universalist was like all people will be saved kind of concept, like that Jesus's sacrifice on the cross was for everyone. And so they united, these two groups, the Unitarians and the Universalists, united and created the Unitarian Universalist, which over time, it's a very, very progressive church, very progressive, very liberal. And they incorporate Christian, Jewish, and like nature-based concepts, and kind of just developed are you familiar with humanism? Probably. Okay, so humanist philosophy, just the concept of valuing human life and well-being. It's a very secular, often atheistic
okay. So I understand the concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this Unitarian Universalist church, they have a very similar type of philosophy. It's very just based on being a good person, being a good part of the community, accepting everyone, loving everyone, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
And so I was gonna rent out that church, which I knew they would be chill about. And I was going to invite friends and family. And there's a Unitarian Universalist hymn called Blue Boat Home. It's a very pretty little song. I can read the lyrics. So I was going to have an opening song. That's Mormon lingo.
There's opening songs in church.
Okay,
in Catholic
okay.
Church. Yeah. It's structured and scheduled.
Is it called the opening song?
Opening hymn.
Oh, okay, so that's shared.
Well, we've had the conversation before where I heard you singing something that I recognized the music of, but not the words.
Right.
And I was like, that sounds like something that I've heard in church my whole life. And you were like, oh yeah, the Mormons stole the song and added new words.
Yeah, they did do that a lot.
Imitation is the highest form of flattery, so there's that.
This, actually, the melody that goes with this hymn is a very common hymn, too. I can sing it, too. If you want me to sing on your podcast.
I don't care.
Okay. So, I was going to have this song as my... I was actually going to do it as a closing thing, now that I remember. Because I just wanted this, like, unifying thing. But the song goes... Though below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. So the lyrics go on. Sun my sail and moon my rudder as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions as we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the light of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
Okay.
So
yeah, I'm fairly certain I heard that song.
Yeah.
Last week.
Oh, there you go. See, and this is when I was planning because an initiation ceremony for completing a year and a day. If you're joining a coven, a lot of times they will there are witch covens.
I'm aware. Yeah,
Okay.
I know about covens.
So
Any bloody daggers?
People
are going to hear initiation to a witch coven and think that you're...
It depends on the group. Some people do blood magic.
Sick.
Metal. Yeah, but all consensual, of course. They're not cutting people open against their will. That would be assault. But also not as common as people would think. Like, most people are gonna immediately go to that, but
that's exactly where I went to. That's where I went.
Much less common.
Okay. So your initiation looks like...
Yeah, so it's like there's a lot of different ways to do it. Some people do it alone. Some people do it with a coven. That they usually have a tradition. Mine, I was going to start by sharing a little bit about my belief system, my views and things. I had 4 friends picked out who were each going to represent one of the 4 elements: earth, air, fire, water. And I was going to have each of them talk about how they knew me and how how the symbolic things that related to the element they were represented had to do with our friendship. And then I was going to do a little ceremony where each of my friends would take an element and bless me with it. So I had, it's kind of cheesy, but I had a fan for air, and then obviously water is like
a fan or
like a fan. Like a hand fan.
Okay.
A hand fan.
Okay.
Yeah. One of those Chinese hand fans.
Would an electric fan, like the ones that you plug into the back of your phone?
If you really wanted to, yes.
Okay.
But I wanted to be a little bit more like...
Sure, old schooly with it, yeah.
Old school with it, yeah.
That's fine. I'm just wondering if...
There are tech witches.
God. Help
that
me.
use, like, computer technology and stuff to do their witchcraft, yes.
Okay.
But, so, so it's just like a handheld fan. And so it would just be like, I had little blessings written out that they would memorize, and it would be like, with, like, this thing, I bless you with air. And it was like, I used symbolism with each of the elements to go with it. And it was all very positive, love-related, light-related, like, goodness.
Good intentions.
Good intentions.
Good energy.
Good energy, yes.
Okay.
Sprinkle me with some water, Catholic style. And then, like, rub a rock on my face. I don't know. I would have been more, like, I would have had a different way to chuck some mud at me.
Throw fucking mud at you. A rock.
But, yeah, so I had all these different... And then I was going to have, like, a ceremonial candle that my fire friend would light and that kind of thing. And, hi, Chase. Sorry, my boyfriend is here. Can you give us just a few minutes? We're still recording. The beans are done, though. So I was gonna have, like, this whole nice little thing, close with that song. I was, like, totally imagining kumbaya status, holding hands, like, everything's great, everyone's crying because it's so wonderful and beautiful, and then we were gonna have, like, a little afterward food thing, this whole thing.
A little witch cake?
Yeah, witch cake.
Positive vibes witch cake?
Yes, positive vibes witch cake. And... that ultimately didn't happen that way because my family reacted pretty negatively, and there were some who were, like, supportive and wanting to come and everything, but ultimately it kind of just broke my heart too much.
Right.
And...
they throw a rock at you, but not in a positive way?
Yeah. Yeah. And so... I don't remember how we got onto this particular topic.
I was asking you how your initiation ceremony would have
gone,
what
yeah.
that would have looked like for you.
Yeah, so that's what it would have looked like for me. A lot of people do something very simple. Ultimately, what I ended up doing was, for the people that I invited that I ultimately decided not to include, I got everybody a little gift as I just appreciate you in my life.
Mm.
And then I still had my 4 friends that I was originally going to have do the ceremony part. We had lunch together, and I had a gift for each of them. And instead of having them do a blessing, I turned it the other way and explained what a blessing they've been in my life. Like, in relating to the blessings that I had written for each of the elements, I expressed how they blessed my life with those things.
Well, that's just fucking beautiful. And I don't know, it's not like I had anything to do with it, but I'm, like, compelled to say that I'm so sorry that you couldn't get the thing that you wanted because of that just deeply sown fear and... hatred for anything that isn't inside of the mainstream Christian thing.
Yeah.
Would you think that they would have responded similarly if you had just said that you were converting to a different church?
Oh, no. They would have been much more supportive. And I know because one of my sisters actually left the Mormon church and she was married in the Catholic Church, mm-hmm. and she baptized her oldest son in the Catholic Church, and without hesitation, my family went to that, and I was a child I was a preteen at the time, and they still felt comfortable with taking me, whereas...
So it's because your thing is evil.
Yeah. It was because my thing was not Christian. is basically what it boiled down to.
Well, I would have shown up and thrown a rock at you.
In a good way.
Yeah. Don't give me the candle. Don't make me do the fire blessing. There's some ancient compulsion will just come out of me toward your hair.
Burn the witch. But, yeah, so it's just... I see it in my personal life. I see it in society at large. Just the subtle ways that there's discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, I'm guilty of this recently. There was a client in our shared employed area at one point who was reading about Wiccanry and witchcraft and doing his best to get more of those materials given to him. And I was super uncomfortable interacting with that person because I was just like, oh, there's bad juju all up in this guy's space, all up in his head, like everywhere. And looking back, I don't think I was ever even uncomfortable on the inside, right? We've had this conversation similarly, like you walk into a place with bad energy and like you know it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I never got that vibe from that person. It was a totally self-procured bias against and fear of.
Yeah.
And looking back at me 2.5, 3 years ago, having that reaction, I'm like, fucking stupid coward. You ignorant bastard.
Right.
And
it's a learning process. I mean, obviously you've come a long way. You're currently sitting in a witch's house.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, well, I mean, getting into the demonology was a really big thing because of first of obviously reading Catholic disciplines and exclusively like Vatican approved materials on the subject, or in non-ordained persons that might have gone and done stuff like this, worked like this, the Warrens. They weren't ordained.
Mm-hmm.
When I started learning about more of it and getting into some of the esoterics and seeing some of the parallels and being like, there's a lot more to the invisible than just what the Catholic Church ascribes to it.
Right.
And if I'm going to not just learn about this stuff, but possibly implement some of this into my life, I can't responsibly look at one perspective and one perspective alone. So I started reading about Kabbalah and Enochian things and getting into the metaphysics and understanding there are people that are devout Catholics that have done this work that believe in a more neutral, non-specific energy is a big thing. Energy is everything. It's in everywhere. It's all over the place.
Electromagnetic waves.
And no matter what you believe in or pray to, what you're putting out into the universe is way more influential than you might think. So when I was understanding that concept, I was like, okay, so cool. If you don't believe in Christianity and you've got all of these other things going on in your spiritual life, but you mean no harm, and you do no harm,
mm-hmm.
then I have no reason to be concerned about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Why should I care? If you're putting out good vibes, you're putting out good vibes. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably a hill that I had to get over that took over a year to get comfortable with it and not feel like I was being like a bad Christian.
Yeah.
for implementing that into my lifestyle.
Yeah.
Which is why I said it's a difficult thing hearing the struggle, understanding the discrimination from your perspective, and being like, well, I'd certainly like to do something to help, but there's a barrier in my brain that says if I'm overly proactive, then I'm lining myself up for a spiritual ass whooping.
Right. And in the last days, or who in a Christian wording, are you on God's side or Satan's side? And
exactly. Right. And anything that right, exactly, that's the exact same thing. So I'm like, I love you as my friend and as a person and as a good soul. And I have no doubt that you're like heaven material. You're certainly not hell material. But if I ask somebody who's been in my church and is 80 years old, you are absolutely hell material, regardless of your intentions or the fact that you might be the nicest human being that I know. Right? Because you haven't accepted Jesus Christ as your Savior, and if you can't check that box off, you're going to burn forever.
Right. Yeah.
So there's another hill that I find myself at the bottom of now.
Okay.
With how do I reconcile being a devout Catholic and also being supportive? And not living my life speaking, voting perhaps, in a way that stymies you and people like you. Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice for me? What do I do? How do I help you and your people without damning myself?
Honestly, I think awareness is a huge part of it, because a lot of the discrimination purely comes from ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was gonna go on a tangent earlier and didn't, but one of my sisters who was even supportive of my ceremony and was like gonna come, she ultimately ended up she didn't ask, she said, Wicca is cool except the animal sacrifice thing. And I'm like, first of all, animal sacrifice is in the Bible, so, and she's Christian, I'm like, you should get over that. But also I'm like, and Wiccans don't do animal sacrifice. In fact, a lot of Wiccans are vegan because they're so, like, pro-life.
Yeah.
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 Like, so I was just like, okay, huge misconception. And then my point is that there are so many misconceptions. There's so much ignorance. There's so much fear. We fear the things that we don't understand, right?
Yep.
And so awareness and education is really one of the biggest things anybody can do, because if you're aware and you're educated about those kinds of things, even if you disagree with them on a personal level, that then gives you like what you would need in order to know, oh, this bill that to me seems totally innocuous, read between the lines, it's discriminatory. You know what I mean? Being able to just like have that little bit of awareness in the back of your mind. A bill passes that has to do with religious rights in public spaces, and you're reading it and it's like, yeah, no problem, that's not a big deal if people want to pray in a government function or whatever. But then you ask yourself, but who's actually gonna get to pray? And when push comes to shove, are they gonna let a Satanist in? Are they gonna let, and do I want a Satanist in? Because that's another thing. It's sometimes the concepts of freedom from religion, which is a pretty common concept among atheists, protects everyone. Mm-hmm. And a lot of Christians are very against that concept because they want God in, they want to put in God we trust on the money. They want to put one nation under God in the Pledge of Allegiance, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they think that it can be inclusive. But when you really think about it, no, it's actually exclusive. And if you were to go more of a direction of, you know what? Maybe prayer doesn't belong in public school. It's a way of protecting everyone, because at home you can still be Catholic. You can still raise your kids Catholic. Mm-hmm. They can still go to Catholic church. They still have all their religious rights. They can still wear their rosary at school. They can still pray on their own at school. But no atheist child or Satanist child or pagan child or Muslim child, none of those children are being discriminated against by the fact that there's a Christian child. And
Right.
the Christian child has just as much rights as everybody else.
So maybe it turns into this deeper, more profound question philosophically of, is it more or less Christ-like to be inclusive or exclusive? That might be the easiest way that I can say what it is that my personal conundrum would be.
Yeah.
If Jesus were here right now, would he be like, I'm gonna just be like Jesus because I'm fucking nice and good, you know?
Yeah.
And if you believe in me, sick. If not, I've got these great guidelines about how to just not be an asshole, and that's like baseline.
Yeah.
Right? Golden rule.
Yeah.
Establish one big new commandment that just is more encompassing.
Well, Jesus already said the greatest 2 commandments are love God, love your neighbor. Maybe not everybody loves God or loves the God that people think they should. Maybe they love gods.
Yeah.
Maybe they love goddess. You know?
So exactly. So is it
but
more or less Christ-like?
It goes into the realm of still love your neighbor is the second one. And you can do both.
So I can love my God
Yeah.
that I believe in, and I can also love my neighbor by not trying to put my neighbor in my box.
Yes. Exactly. I think that's a good note to end on.
It might be. I got one last question, though.
Oh, okay.
I know that he's home and you're trying to... I didn't want to push it on your evening at all. What is something that people should avoid in the world of witchcraft if they don't want to invite negativity in? I know that it has a lot of... We already established it's intentional, right? Mm-hmm. And there's energy, and what it is that you're basically asking for or putting out is what you can expect.
Mm-hmm.
But what's something that, like, you would...
What are the taboos within
What are some
witchcraft?
taboos? What's something that you would absolutely avoid if you weren't trying to get fucking lassoed by evil?
Okay. So basically like Wiccan or not Wiccan, but witchcraft morality.
Sure.
I'm thinking Wiccan because my brain went to the Wiccan Rede, which is if it harm none, do as you will. Mm-hmm. Basically, and that actually also is complemented by a concept of the threefold law, which is that anything you put out, you will get back 3 times as much. Mm-hmm. So you put out negativity, you get back negativity threefold kind of concept.
So if you pray for President Trump to die under a blood moon, then you're asking for trouble.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So there's that kind of a concept. That's a Wiccan way of putting it. And there's a lot of debate. There are definitely witches who are willing to do the taboo things. Mm-hmm. I personally am very much in the realm of I believe in karma. I think that what I put back will come back and bite me, and I prefer it to be nice.
Yeah, no, it's an insurance policy.
Yeah.
That's one thing that all religions have in common. I could be an asshole, but maybe that might fuck me up.
Yes, yeah. So
might as well be good.
Might as well be good. But, I mean, there's also the concept of I do think people should be good just for goodness sake. Like, mm-hmm. Yeah. But, so, anything that causes harm, I would say is pretty taboo. One of the things that is commonly talked about and is pretty taboo is love spells.
Because you remove consent.
Yes, because you remove consent, and it can do a lot of harm. I've heard personal stories of marriages falling apart because somebody cast a love spell on one of the spouses, and then an affair happens, or stuff like that.
By the caster.
Yeah, so like the caster becomes the other...
And then the partner who may be under the influence of this spell is totally fucked up over the affair. In an unusual way.
Yeah.
Because they have a spell cast on them.
Yeah, and it also, I mean, this also goes into the realm of like how hard do you believe in this type of power?
Yeah, because you say love spell, and I'm like, like pink dust, and they're like infatuated until the day they die, or someone says the magic word and they fall out of love.
Right. So it does go into the realm of how much do you believe this stuff has power, because you've got witches that range from extremely like theistic, like really believe in like that there is power, not to like Harry Potter level, but to like that they literally believe.
How close
in
to
these
Harry Potter?
things. Pretty far away from Harry Potter.
Okay. Because I'm like, how far do we go until we have like luminescent projectiles?
Yeah, pretty far away from Harry Potter, though I do have a wand.
Great.
And then you've got all the way to very atheistic witchcraft views, where it's more just a sense of connection to nature and like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily believe that there's anything.
Yeah, no gods, no
magical.
kings, we're all
Yeah.
just connected.
Yeah.
And it's the energy
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. So you've got everybody in the middle. So I'm like probably somewhere in between.
Okay.
And so it also goes into the realm, how much do you believe in it? So for a lot of people, a love spell's not all that taboo because they don't believe it will actually work like that way. It's not going to actually force someone to fall in love with you. But they might cast a love spell that's more in line of the concept of like creating love in themselves and having love for others, which in that case, that's a positive thing. Right? So it just kind of, it partially depends on a person's view of things. So I personally don't believe that if I hate someone, I can give them cancer with a spell.
That's good.
I don't believe that that's possible.
Okay.
But even if
There are
it
people who are out
was
there
possible, I wouldn't do it.
that do believe that.
Like,
do you think there
I
are
am-
Hollywood-style
I am-
witches out there that are, like, legitimately, like, into it?
I am hesitant to say it doesn't exist, but at the same time, I would say it's probably a very small minority.
Because, like I said, I did share that. I told you. I think I might have shared the link, or I texted you and was like, do you know anything about this weird thing I saw on Facebook where, like, a bunch of witches all over the world are trying to pray under, like, the strawberry moon for Trump to...
Right, yes. See, and that's a thing. See, and that goes into realms of, like, the community is so vast that it's like, okay, so Catholics are pretty normal, like, among Christianity. Then you've got those people who, like, dance with snakes and stuff and, like, speak in tongues. And, yeah, like, you get into a little bit more esoteric type.
I've met somebody who spoke in tongues,
Yeah.
allegedly, and I was definitely like, I could do that too. Like, I can close my eyes, put my hands up, and just like while I'm... Yeah.
Right.
Are you sure you don't just have, like, a blood clot
Oh, jeez.
somewhere?
Yeah, so there's spectrum. There's spectrum. And basically, I would generally just say, in order to avoid bad juju, don't send out bad juju.
That's fair.
Good way to create negativity, or to get negativity, is create it yourself.
And do you think something like all of those witches sharing on Facebook, what they're going to do, do you think there's a lot of creative energy potential there? I think that was just, like, could that have been an internet troll, or could there be actually a lot of people that are really intentionally wanting to put bad juju out there on one
Oh, I
person,
think
and that
there
could
probably
very
are.
possibly have an actual physical effect on him?
Whether or not it could have a physical effect on him goes into whether or not I believe in that extent of things,
Right.
which I get skeptical.
Gotcha. Okay.
There's, like, the part of me that is like, nah, that could work. And then there's the part of me that's like, that seems a little far-fetched. You know?
This is a similar issue with Catholics saying that if every Catholic on earth just got down on their knees all at once and prayed the rosary for world peace, there would be world peace.
Right.
Like that.
Exactly. It is the same kind of concept of, like,
Mass creative energy focused on a singular goal.
yeah. And that goes into the realm. How much do you believe in it as a literal thing? Because there's a lot that you can take purely symbolic. There's a lot that you can take symbolic for internal things that you do actually have genuine control over, whether you're a witch or not.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are things that you can take as like, no, literally I can, the faith that moves mountains in Christian terms,
Yeah, picks that bitch up and just fucking scooches it.
Yeah, so.
That was a lot.
That was a lot.
And almost 2 hours.
Wow.
Gone in a flash. That's just what happens when the conversation's good.
Skim the surface.
Luckily there are some parts in there that weren't just us talking. The bean situation and...
yeah.
Well, we're going to have to do this or something like this again because this is something I want to know more about.
Okay. We could do this is 101. We could do a 102.
Yeah, definitely. 001 or just later down the road, re-invite for more conversation. I might have to start taking fucking notes or something. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I will leave you and your boyfriend alone. And you should burn a little candle for me to try and get a good night's sleep tonight because that's something I'm constantly struggling
You really
with.
want me to?
I'm curious. But now that I've said that, I'm wondering if I'll just get a really good night's sleep because I've convinced myself that you're going to burn a candle for me to get a good night's sleep, and maybe it's all psychosomatic.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that's that then, huh?
Cool. Was that recorded too? The candle thing?
Yeah, no, it was all recorded. It'll cut off probably where I said, okay, cool. So this is the best part, Chase, where you were being really quiet and walking through really carefully. There's also a video recording, so you're just standing there at some point for a couple minutes, like moving a towel very calmly.
What's your setup? I'm actually trying to get 2 podcasts off the ground, no video recording, and I was looking at mics to get a secondary mic.
It is a Blue Yeti.
Those things are expensive, but I've heard they're very good quality.
It sounds really good. Yeah, I'm huge. Oh shit, I'm still recording.